but the remaining patrol drones altered their course to steer clear of the vats, confirming Scourge's theory that the trick would only work once. They opened fire, but their target suddenly reversed his direction to race back along the catwalk toward the assault droid on the floor below. One of the bolts struck Scourge squarely between the shoulder blades, but luckily didn't penetrate his armor. The assault droid continued to fire ineffectually at Scourge from below as he charged at it. He closed the gap until he was directly above it, then grabbed the catwalk safety rail and vaulted over the side, leaned directly on the square, flat top of the assault droid and chopped down with his lightsaber. The blade bit deep into the droid's armor plating but failed to reach any of the internal circuitry. The droid shook angrily from side to side, and Scourge was thrown off. Rolling to absorb the landing, he scrambled to his feet and circled behind the droid. He knew his only chance was to stay on its blind side, so it wouldn't be able to bring its blaster cannons to bear. He slashed at the armor-plated body twice more. The first blow left a scorched furrow. The second, delivered in precisely the same location, went all the way through. The assault droid reacted with a shudder, momentarily listing to one side. But before Scourge could follow up with another attack, it kicked out with one of its massive legs, catching him in the chest and sending him crashing to the ground. A sharp pain shot up from his side, and he knew at least one of his ribs had been cracked. The assault droid was slowly clickily turning to face him. The three remaining patrol drones were once again bearing down on him, close enough to open fire. Scourge scrambled forward on his hands and knees. The assault droid was tall enough for him to crawl under its legs and take shelter beneath its body. The blaster bolts from the patrol drones ricocheted ineffectually off the larger droid's armor plating. The assault droid returned fire, its programming instinctively identifying anyone firing it as a hostile threat. Blaster cannons tore through the patrol drones, reducing all three to scrap. At the same time, Scourge drove his lightsaber up into the assault droid to save costs and improve mobility. The underside of the droid wasn't equipped with the heavy armor plating that protected the rest of its exterior, and the blade went deep. Scourge stabbed the vulnerable belly twice more before rolling clear and springing back to his feet. Staggering, the droid tried to turn to face him. It was leaking thick, black lubricant from where Scourge had sliced it open, the liquid forming a rapidly spreading pool beneath its feet. A muffled explosion came from somewhere inside the droid, and a wisp of smoke curled out. Its legs sagged, and it slowly toppled forward, then lay still. Scourge didn't have time to savor his victory. A swarm of patrol drones poured into the room, emerging alone, or in pairs from passages on both the north and south walls. At the same time, two more assault droids marched into view, and the Sith Lord's spirit sank. There was no shame in fleeing a battle that couldn't be won. Only a fool continued to fight against impossible odds. Even if he were willing to risk Naris's wrath by abandoning Setchel, Scourge doubted escape would be possible. There were too many droids, and he was nearing the point of total exhaustion. With a grim smile, he raised his lightsaber, prepared to inflict as much damage as possible before he died. And then suddenly everything went dark. Scourge fumbled for his night goggles, knowing the illumination from his lightsaber wouldn't be enough to fight by. He yanked them from his belt and slid them into place, then stood stock still, stunned by what he was seeing. None of the droids had taken the opportunity to advance on him. The assault droids hadn't moved. The patrol drones had all fallen to the ground. Only then did he register the fact that it wasn't just dark. It was silent. The deafening engines had ground to a halt. The conveyor belts were quieted, and even the assembly droids seemed to be frozen in place. He punched the comlink on his wrist. "Setchel, are you there?" "You're still alive?" Setchel asked. He sounded surprised, but before Scourge could ponder that, he swiftly added, "Good. I was afraid you wouldn't make it." "What just happened?" "I copied the files I needed from the records office. Then I sliced into the power grid and used the emergency array to shut everything down. Figured you could use the help." "I could have handled it if it wasn't for the assault droids," Scourge said, making no effort to hide the accusation. "What droids? Really? Must be a new prototype your DM is working on." "How you know?" Scourge asked. "It's near the records office. Stay there. "I'll come get you. I don't think we have time for that," Satchel said. "What are you talking about?" "You know those big vats? They use tritium generators to melt the metal, shutting down the power grid to stabilize the reactor cores. How long before they blow?" "Not long enough to keep discussing it." Scourge took the hint. Forcing his weary legs into a run, he raced across the pitch-black manufacturing floor. His broken ribs made it almost impossible to catch his breath, and his thighs and calves were on fire. He caught up to SWTOR halfway down the maintenance corridor they had used to enter the building. He didn't say anything as he ran, conserving what little breath he had for a final push to get clear of the blast radius. He burst through the maintenance door and into the cool night air, Satchel only a few steps behind him. Jumping the security fence was an option in his current state, so he headed for the gate he'd unlocked for Satchel at the start of the mission. He was slowing down, the weight of his armor sapping the last of his strength. He drew on the force to give himself a last burst of speed. Satchel caught up with a few steps before the gate. The blast wave caught them an instant later. Fortunately, most of the explosion was contained within the plant, preventing them from being pulverized by the concussive force. As it was, they were swept off their feet and sent tumbling through the security gate by a wall of air, sound, and shards of glass. Scourge hit the ground, rolled onto his stomach, and instinctively covered the back of his head as debris rained down around them. He lay there for about 30 seconds, ears still ringing. He forced himself to his feet, triggering a coughing fit. The broken rib that made it feel like his chest was being stabbed as he hacked up blood-flecked phlegm. The back of his head and neck were also bleeding. Flying glass had cut him at least a dozen places, though his armor had shielded most of his body. Confident that none of his injuries were life-threatening, he turned his attention to his companion. Satchel lay face down on the ground beside him, not moving. He hadn't been wearing any armor, and his back was a bloody mess, though the glass shards had shredded his clothes and the flesh beneath. All of the wounds looked superficial. Scourge prodded him with his foot until he finally responded with a groan. Get up," Scourge wheezed. "I'm too weak to carry you." Satchel did as ordered, and the pair of them limped back through the forest toward their waiting shuttle. Behind them, the UD implant burned.